You know, it was my family that got me into tennis. I have a mother that played quite well, two elder brothers that were, at that stage a whole lot better than I was. And so, they were Queensland country champions. Actually, as a kid, and I was my first year of high school, and I ended up catching yellow jaundice. And they said I was highly contagious and I had to leave school. I went back into Rockhampton and said, I'll finish my exams now. And they said, no, you have to do the whole year again. And at that stage, I thought, there's no way I want to do that again. And so I asked my mother and father, and they then found them getting involved with Adrian Quist from Sydney. He was a Dunlop representative in Sydney and pretty much all of Australia. He was involved with everybody. But that was my opportunity to then go to Brisbane with a job, stringing rackets or just being able to be in Brisbane and work. At the same time, I got that opportunity to go out and play tennis with a lot of the older players, and that was how I started off, really, working and playing in junior tournaments, and enjoyed working hard and getting out and performing as well as I could as a kid. My amateur career pretty much was always with Dunlop. I used an Australian Dunlop, made in Australia, and had one racket was my name on it. Used it, and I found out that the Dunlop Fort racket from England was the one that I really preferred. It was more flexible and was able to give me some effort, and I felt I had the timing down. And so that was where I went to, and I think then I stayed with Dunlop Forts around my whole career. And I had a good coach in Rockhampton, a fellow called Charlie Hollis, and he told me a lot of things that he'd been through in his own life. And he'd been to overseas. He'd played international tennis, and he said, "You lefties, you have that weak backhand," and he said, "You with a backhand like that, you'll never win Wimbledon, and so you'll have to learn to hit it flat or go over the ball and get topspin on the ball." And he started me off at age 13, thinking that's what I should be doing. I knew for a long time that I was hitting in the cheap seats for a long time. I just didn't have the control. But when my arm got a little stronger and I felt like I could, control the ball, that's when I started winning more, and it didn't faze me. And that thought, I think, got me close to how I loved the game. And your competition brings out the best in you. Some days you'd feel that you're not playing very well, and the next day, all of a sudden, you're saying great. And so I found myself, playing, in that type of framework. And I'd say, God, I'm hitting the ball well today. And that was how it was for me. And I learnt through all the matches I played. That's how I improved myself. No, I think I enjoyed the competition, and generally a lot of it was winning. But if you're winning, you feel like, I'm heading in the right direction. It was just purely that I felt like, I could continually improve. There's no substitute for unless you get prepared to get out there and put hard work in. 2-on-1 drills, 2 at the baseline, 1 at the net, and you'd be working all the way through until you're exhausted. You can look at many areas where you say, well, how do I get any better? But that's how it happens, is if you're prepared to put the effort in, don't just sit there. Do something about it, whether it be, whether you're doing push-ups, or whether you're running around, or maybe you've got a book that you're reading. That's how you improve. And that's the steady groundwork that I think you need to put in as a junior or anyone starting off in the game of tennis. A lot of times I don't know whether you'd want to become a tennis player if you didn't have anybody in front of you. Going out into the Western Queensland and New South Wales, enjoying the exhibitions that we were doing, and that was part of going through all the mechanics. Sometimes the court wasn't very good, Sometimes it was a hard court. Sometimes it was clay. We had a lot of grass on the court as well. But you had to make do, and you had to be a tennis player at that hour. With like Lou Hode and Frank Sedgman, and Kent Rosewall, Ashley Cooper, Roy Emerson. We all came along together, and I think we, champions breed champions. And I think they were the champions, and I was the kid on the block, and thinking, how can I be this good? You guys are so good. I think you live and learn from a person like, whether it be Hode or whether it be Sedgman. You can see what they did with a volley, how deep they volleyed it, were they short, and then how do you work with, what did they do after that? And that's the learning curve, for me anyway. But the learning curve was to know what they did after this particular shot happened. Was it their footwork? Was it their just watching the ball? Were they trying for too much? Maybe they should have lobbed the ball? Lots of options, that is, when you're watching a match. You learn a lot from their technique. A lot of the times, I've mentioned to a lot of different people, this is just make sure you watch their feet. Just see if their feet are moving and how they're getting to the ball. And I think that's one of the most important things, on a level of improving. I think that's where I found that, it was the best technique for me, was to watch some of these players. I've certainly marveled at people like, Federer and Djokovic, Nadal, and even going back to Sampras and that group. They all work on a few techniques, but it's the technique that's going to improve you. They're not talking of some, am I watching the ball? You've got to be able to know that that's what you're doing. You go one level above than saying, am I watching the ball? Of course you're watching the ball, but you've got to be able to say, what are you going to do with it now? And that's where I think, you're playing with great champions, you get that opportunity. My greatest achievements certainly is winning Wimbledon. I think it's always been an idol of being with a lot of various people, and so winning Wimbledon, to me, this is the number one tournament in the world in my mind. But then again, being fortunate enough to win the Grand Slam in 1969 certainly, put a big feather in my cap to be able to, that was the first year of open tennis, and that was coming to Brisbane and competing, on that particular occasion, and then winning it, and then going to the French and pulling it off there, and then Wimbledon, and of course the US Open. So, I've been very fortunate to play some of my best tennis at the right time. I'm thrilled that my name is on that trophy 3 times. So that I think is the first thing that comes to mind, is that I was successful here. And I think you can talk a lot about any of the tournaments you're around, but your hometown, is where you started off. And I think that's where I'm coming from, is, competing and being able to play Davis Cup and win Davis Cup the last 4 or 5 years. I'm very happy to be a part of that establishment. It is totally amazing to know that Kooyong, White City, Milton, these places were there as amateurs, and we all played them. But then in Melbourne, they put a beautiful stadium up, which they named it the Rod Laver Tennis Centre, which I'm amazed that happened, but I'm thrilled that it did. And coming down here every year, that today's great players is, a thrill in its own right. And so I'm, thrilled to be able to be here competing and seeing these great champions play. I think for me, I feel like I'm coming home. This particular tournament, I played Tony Roach, and I'm serving, and I've got my spikes on. I'm ready to move no matter which way they go. the circumstances weren't conducive to good tennis because we'd had rain for 2 or 3 days. It's pressure. You're not going to say anything other than that in a way, because it's the pressure of playing, in into the fourth final, having won the last 3, and someone that I hadn't played any left-handers in years. So it was a lot of pressure. I volleyed the ball and into Tony's right hand, being a lefty, to his forehand, and he hit it wide. And that was the end of it. And I jumped the net and shook his hand. For me, it was concentration that was my best savior. And I was able to be a person that could play well under pressure and not be nervous. The nervousness actually put determination into my game. I tried to make an effort every time I hit a ball. I was doing something with it. And I think maybe a lot of the players, felt that my game was more attractive than some of the others that were competing. I was grit and determination that I was going to win this match. You look at Roger Federer, the way he plays and competes. He's purely playing the way he sees it. If he sees it to be hitting a forehand down the line, that's what he's going to do. Whereas a lot of people think, well, maybe he shouldn't have done that. Maybe he should be more safe and go over onto the open court. And so, there's the difference. Nothing much it's fairly technical, but it isn't something that you have to worry about. That's just the way I felt at that moment. That's what I was going to do. And so I think that you can talk to a lot of players. Like I played Roosevelt 50 or 60 times in finals, and we battled it out. And there's no saying how he's going to play against me at this particular time, because I don't know what I'm going to do against him. But it's a challenge every time. It's a clean sport, and I think if you put the effort in, good things can happen. I don't have any specific thoughts in mind on, what people think about my game or think about me. But I think, the main thing that I found is that you've got to wake up and be a good person, put all the clients and your efforts together. You come down to, Australia and competed and played here all my life. I think, it's a great treasure to be recognized as someone that has played his best tennis at the right time and has competed. And I think knowing that you're one of their idols, I guess, around the world, and humbling is not something. It's not a good virtue, I don't think, sometimes, because you let things get away from you a little bit quicker than sometimes you'd like to say, I'm not really humble. I'm not showing off. I'm just there to play and compete. And I think that's the one thing that you see happen a lot of times in tennis. And there's disappointments drag you down. And I never let disappointments take hold of my career. I always was a Dunlop player from the time that I was 13, and enjoyed all that. I enjoyed getting a free racket or two from Dunlop back at that era. And so you do. You feel that's your starting level. And I think being able to go and work down at Dunlop in Brisbane was a great opportunity. There was a lot of people down there that competed, and so you knew that there was a lot of competition. And that's the one thing that I think, as a Dunlop player, I was given that opportunity to be in there and compete against a lot of these people. And I think that started me off when I was 12, 13, 14. And that's how I still feel today with, the fact that back then I used a Dunlop racket that was, specially made for me. And that to me, is an honor to be able to receive a racket like that from England. At the age of 14, 15, 16 probably, saying, I know that you want to be a tennis player, but how good can you get as a tennis player? And I think that's the one thing that I prided myself in, saying, one day I'm going to be a good tennis player. That's why I've been recognized as a tennis player that enjoyed the sport competed hard, and in effect was just, a great opportunity to see the world.